You hear that? Or see it? What about that feeling? Like you're being watched. Like your head is going to explode. And the burning. That car's been trailing you for pretty long. And you saw that same box truck when you walked out of the store yesterday. What a wild coincidence, huh? But what if it's not? What if you saw something you shouldn't? You know they could see your search history, right? They have backdoor access to all your devices. You may not be backing up your files, but someone sure is. Why you, though? What makes you so special? Exactly what they'd want you to question. The first step is always denial. But a denial of what exactly? Well, let me tell you a story. It's about a woman. Let's call her Liza. She's your average 56-year-old who lived a normal life as an artist and even founded her own web development company after working at Microsoft for a decade. But then, the attacks started. Sudden feelings of ungodly pressure inside of her skull, pushing her beyond the limits of pain she knew was possible. Waking every morning, looking at slightly raised bumps on her hands, convinced that she's being injected with microchips, tracking her each and every move. Her family has started to grow noticeably distant, almost like they're being instructed or programmed to do so. Brought to her absolute limit, she was committed to a 10-day hold in a mental ward, hoping this would make the symptoms subside. While she managed to ease her anxious symptoms, this didn't stop the attacks from happening. But then, she did research online and found out she was not alone, not by a long shot. In fact, it was a worldwide community sharing a similar plight, branding themselves as targeted individuals, or TIs. This group, stemming from all walks of life, were eager to share their experiences and knowledge about these attacks to anyone willing. This opened up a whole different world for Liza. In fact, it felt like opening a crack into a whole new universe, she claimed. Psychotronic weapons, brain-computer interface, and electronic harassment all started to make sense. She did work in the technology sector for years now, so she knew firsthand what it could be capable of. But now she had a community for support, who could collectively take action and bring justice to the victims of this seemingly coordinated harassment and stalking. What could explain this phenomenon? Well, let's start from the beginning. StopGangstalkingCrimes.com defines gangstalking as a systematic form of control which seeks to destroy every aspect of a targeted individual's life. A more elaborative definition would describe it as, quote, an organized malevolent effort to use whatever tactics necessary to psychologically torture a given subject for the purpose of intimidation. This is inherently not a strange concept to question. Organized groups have always leveraged their influence or power in order to keep certain individuals in line. However, the first documented organized effort by a government was seen throughout the Cold War, specifically in Soviet-occupied East Germany. Directive 1/76 on the development and revision of operational procedures outlined the intentional use of gangstalking by Stasi, or secret police, for the direct goal of intimidation in a manner labeled Zersetzung, the German word for decomposition or disruption. These procedures, lasting decades, led to the systematic torture of thousands of those the state would deem as, quote, agitators. The Stasi, allegedly creating a network of over 500,000 informal collaborators, would use these seemingly normal citizens to completely encircle a suspect's life. First it would start with your mail being tampered with, then soon your vehicle, then your furniture would be strangely rearranged. Then co-workers would start ignoring your existence, all to escalate to a breaking point, where over time, these agents and collaborators learned every weakness and fear you possessed in order to completely break you mentally. Jürgen Fuchs is a notable victim of many to this barbaric practice. Born in 1950, he was a known writer and dissident voice residing east of the Berlin Wall, where his critical views of the Socialist Party were quite more than unwelcome. Fuchs was eventually arrested for, quote, anti-state agitation in 1976, serving a 9-month prison sentence rife with interrogation, and then deported to West Berlin in 1977. This was not the end of his troubles, however, as the following decade saw him and his family's lives wrought with psychological torture many couldn't imagine. These Stasi reports from 1982 document the threats that his, quote, hostile activities posed in the public eye, and the decomposition measures taken to break him. Notable measures including non-stop calls at all times of the night, ordering unwanted services at random on his behalf, and escalating to the point of physical violence, even attempting a bomb attack directly in front of his house. After the wall fell in 1989 and the subsequent collapse of the Soviet Union, Fuchs passed away in 1999 under suspicious circumstances, along with other notable dissidents within a similar time frame. All dying from rare forms of cancer, it's alleged that during their imprisonments, they were exposed to deliberate radioactive contamination, or basically, weaponized X-ray devices. This would also be considered the first alleged case of what the TI community labels as electronic harassment. With the prevalence of technology saturating our everyday life, according to the community, this is the primary avenue used for the direct purpose of psychological torture. And you know what? I might actually believe them. V2K, known as voice to skull or synthetic telepathy, microwave hearing, voice of God weapon, is a major player in these operations, according to TIs. It all stems from real-life patents, even dating back to 1962. I'm not even joking, here's a whole list of researchable numbers. But as a brief summary, the technology operates due to a phenomenon known as the Frey effect, or the human perception of audible clicks, buzzing, hissing, and knocking induced by pulsed or modulated radio frequencies. It was first observed by American soldiers in World War II, operating in the vicinity of field radio transponders, where bystanders would complain about hearing the transmissions audibly projected into their skulls, along with splitting headaches as a result. Research by Alan H. Frey, of the namesake, done in the early 60s, uncovered interesting results observing the effect. He and his team found out, by adjusting transmitter pulse parameters and directing the device towards a subject, they were able to manipulate symptoms physically felt by the subject, such as induced feelings of dizziness or nausea, a simulated pins and needles sensation throughout the body, and a perceptive buffeting sound echoed within someone's skull. When studied further, years later, researchers were able to transmit voice-modulated microwaves in which subjects were able to perceive 9 out of 10 words transmitted at a time. A thermic effect was also observed when sustained for a period of time, which actually would work similarly to a conventional microwave oven, but would also cause brain damage in a similar window where it would be physically perceived. Critics of V2K often cite this aspect of the phenomenon when critiquing the validity of such a force to be weaponized, as it could possibly, quote, kill you before you'd be bothered by a noise. But this hasn't swayed fervent believers and victims alike to deviate from their accounts of such torture, even when coming from those with national secrets to keep. Havana syndrome is known as a broad cluster of strange symptoms experienced by U.S. government and military personnel when stationed abroad, specifically in China, Vietnam, Eastern Europe, and as the name would suggest, Cuba. In the latter case, in mid-2017, 21 unique reports of severe headaches, tinnitus, and overall cognitive dysfunction were cited by individual personnel stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, as well as the nearby hotel. These cited a similar story, being the sensation of grating noises perceived from a specific direction, and a feeling of pressure, vibrations, and an audible buffeting inside the skull. These would last from 20 seconds to 30 minutes in some cases, but would almost always leave the victims with noticeable side effects. And each case would seem suspiciously targeted towards field agents, officers, and diplomats alike, without family or guests in neighboring hotel rooms experiencing any effects. When this phenomenon among US personnel spread into a seemingly worldwide issue, agencies such as the CIA and DoD were tasked with investigating the cause for this seemingly invisible threat. The Jason Group, a scientific advisory council for the federal government, ruled that the cause for the strike of illnesses in Cuba was simply the calling song of Indi's short-tailed crickets from the audio excerpts and an unknown variable causing the symptoms. Biomedical engineers in favor of the microwave targeting theory propose that the typical audio recording devices cannot perceive said microwaves, basically invalidating any conventional explanation for the phenomenon. Whether it be psychotronic proxy weapon testing or a directed attack by foreign agents, there's no resolution that seemingly makes any government entity look innocent. But it points to a common thread noticed by TIs, whose personal anecdotes can definitely make things seem more suspicious. In 2003, President Bush signed Homeland Security Presidential Directive 6, or simply HSPD-6. This essentially expanded the authority of state departments, establishing a terrorist screening center, and most notably, a consolidated terror watch list between branches. And yes, this is probably a similar watch list you'll find yourself on when you start Googling for questionable information early in the morning. Not that I can relate at all. But this list allegedly names more than 6 million individuals all over the world. However, the true number is unknown to the public due to the FBI and DOJ never disclosing it. And according to FBI agents under oath, 97% of listed names have no known ties to terrorism or violent groups. So what could they be keeping all these names for? TIs allege that more than 300,000 civilian men, women, and even children exist on this watch list for ambiguous reasons. Yet, accounts of targeted harassment seem to grow every day. It's possible that you could be on this list right now, being monitored without even knowing it. But the TIs that are allegedly aware tend to have their own theories and anecdotes to prove such activity. Many of them believe that cell towers, in conjunction with relay satellites, can be used to track and hit multiple targets at once using beam steering, even through multiple walls. This has been alleged to be powerful enough to heat the surface of the skin of a subject, even causing second-degree burns on those repeatedly targeted. The physical intimidation that comes along with these anecdotes cannot be ignored either, with similar allegations quite reminiscent of the Stasi in former East Germany, with cars allegedly trailing victims, attempting to run them off the road, breaking into their houses, rearranging their furniture, and deploying any methods possible to discredit their anecdotes by working with state authorities. TIs often have tales that fall on deaf ears. But the two most plausible cases to occur in recent history was the targeted harassment of the most notable whistleblowers and leakers in memory, being Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, with Assange's mother telling the press that he was subjected to ELF and V2K torture while housed within the Ecuadorian embassy in London, causing concern for his health. She was then subsequently banned on various social media platforms, including Twitter. So, think of that how you will. The possibility of active psychosis and delusion in many supposed victims is something that cannot be ignored, however, as it has had real-world tragic consequences as a result. In 2013, Fayed Abdo Ahmed, a 20-year-old man, held a Louisiana bank hostage, eventually taking out 2 of the hostages before turning the gun on himself. He was allegedly paranoid schizophrenic who was disturbed by a belief that his ex's family implanted a microphone device inside of his head. In that same year, Aaron Alexis fatally shot 12 people and injured 3 more in the Washington Navy Yard, using a shotgun that had, quote, "my elf weapon," written on the side. Authorities believe that he had, quote, delusional beliefs, stemming from a pathology profile leaning towards schizophrenia. Though it is unfair to judge the experiences of those suffering from what is believed to be a targeted attack, it presents a complicated dilemma whether it should be a cause for concern in one matter of believability or the other. For me personally, I believe gangstalking is a reality that many are unaware of, but it reveals itself in ways that many will ignore or brush off. In short, the National Security Agency, or NSA, has been known to engage in massive surveillance of domestic communications and records of said communication since at least 2001, all under the guise and pen of the Patriot Act, basically circumventing any constitutional right to privacy through vague parameters. So just imagine every detail about you that they could have filed away in a database, ready to be accessed if needed. And when it's needed can be a relative term. Do you have beliefs that could put you on their radar? Do you disagree or express those beliefs in contradiction to whatever the current administration's whims are? Even if they're not expressed outwardly, a simple gauge of your search history can typically make an accurate profile of who you are. This is intel that the Stasi, USSR, or any regime would have killed to have access to, and yet we think we have freedoms. Perhaps the future of AI, combined with a larger network of generated bots on all platforms, can be utilized by these agencies or NGOs to truly intimidate who they'd want to break. Now just imagine the most toxic TikTok or Twitter doxing comment thread filled with bots that know every researchable detail about your life, torturing you online for the world to see. Maybe it's a pessimistic future, but people with intent and motives typically stay the same at any time in history. And with technology growing, while privacies recede every day forward, make sure to keep a lookout on who or what could be keeping an eye on you. It could be a thread that leads all the way to the top. I want to thank you for watching. This is probably a fairly niche subject that many haven't done much research on, so I'm glad you made it this far. There was a lot of information to condense to make it presentable, but maybe a follow-up with sharing real-life accounts may be an interesting idea. But I'll see. I have many other subjects I intend on diving deep into, especially regarding conspiracies and declassified CIA projects. So feel free to subscribe and like the video for any updates. But until then, I've been Terror Lord, so stay frosty out there.